Welcome to Coding Blind Tech. Hey, welcome back to Coding Blind Tech, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at the network tab inside of DOMContentLoaded. So this was the video I said that would be next in this series. If you haven't seen those recent videos in the playlist, make sure you take a look at them. I have put that down in the description below and then also pin those in the comments. Alright, so we're going to be taking a look at the network tab with NVDA screen reader. So the network tab in DOMContentLoaded is the place where you can see all files loaded, all requests made, and then you can also see the responses from those requests. So we're going to take a look at the request logs table. Then we're also going to click into a request and see what the response header or different header information looks like. And then we're going to be looking at how we can filter down those requests, and then we'll wrap it up there. I also want to mention to Ariel Farrow that sources will be coming soon. So the goal is we're going to go through networking, and then elements will be the next video, and then sources will come after that. So thanks for pointing that out. I appreciate that. Okay, so I built this demo app to help showcase the network tab and a few things that can help you get used to the basics of just moving around and what to look for. So getting started, we'll just read through this real quick. So I'm going to go to the top of the page with Control plus Home.
Graphic Coding Blind Tech 3D Glasses Logo Heading Level 1 Network Tab Demo.
All right, so you hear there we have an image and then a network tab demo.
This page loads a document, comma, a style sheet, comma, a script, comma, and an image. Dot. The buttons below make fetch requests you can find in the network tab. Dot.
Awesome. So there I down arrowed, and so I have a couple sentences here just talking about what gets loaded. So like I said, we load a document, a style sheet, a script, and then also an image. And then there's two buttons that we're about to come across now.
Button load team roster.
So load team roster.
Button request a missing file.
And request a missing file. So those are fetch requests to the server. And then one of them will load a roster, which is down below. So I'll down arrow a couple more times.
Region heading level 2 team roster.
All right, so we have our team roster.
List with one item bullet roster not loaded yet. Dot.
And then here we have a bullet list. The roster is not loaded yet, but I did interrupt the screen reader there, so let me read it out loud again.
Bullet roster not loaded yet. Dot. Use the load team roster button. Dot.
All right, we just explained to use the load team roster button. All right, so going back up to the top of the page.
Out of list, out of region graphic.
The one more explanation, those buttons. So again, we're going to click those and it just represents a request to the server, and then we get a response, and then we can also showcase those on how we can kind of sort through the networking tab. All right, so now we're actually going to get into it. So we're going to open up the networking tab with, first we got to open up DevTools. So I'm going to do Control-Shift-I, or you can also use F12.
DevTool console grouping. Console prompt edit has autocomplete multi-line blank.
All right, so you hear there, so it automatically puts me in browse mode, and it sits me right inside of the console. So I'm on the console tab. We need to switch to the networking tab. To do that, I'm going to do Control-Shift-P as in Papa.
Quick open dialog. Combo box expanded opens list.
All right, so this brings up our quick open, and I'm just going to type network. So network, and then hit enter.
Network grouping. Toolbar. Filter edit has autocomplete multi-line filter.
Nice. Okay, so it opens up the networking tab, and you can hear the focus immediately went into, again, browse mode, and it's inside of the search field or the filter box where you can actually type a search query and it will filter out those results, very similar to the filter in the console. All right, so right here, I'm going to go ahead and stop and let you know that this is not the friendliest area. I've learned over the years, the main goal is just to understand what you're looking for and where to find it. And so I've focused heavily on that. There's definitely some elements on the page that are just not readable or maybe 50% accessible, meaning that you can get to them, but it takes a lot of time, and maybe the comprehension gets, worse and worse as you try to figure out what's going on. And then again, that's just a time burner. So in here, we are going to most certainly just look at the basics, and I'll give you an idea of how I move around the networking tab. But I should also mention that in a future video, especially, and it'll be within this playlist, I'll show you how modern day you can deal with dev tools, but using an MCP server and AI. All right, so let's go ahead and get out of this search filter. I'm gonna hit escape. Sometimes you have to do your NVDA modifier key plus spacebar to get out of browse mode. But there we hit escape. Now, what we're gonna go look at, I'm just gonna down arrow. Actually, the best thing to do, I'm gonna go to the bottom of the page with Control End, and we'll work up.
Out of edit, out of toolbar, out of grouping, drawer hidden.
All right, so from here, I'm gonna hit up arrow.
Network grouping clickable load colon 396 milliseconds.
All right, so I'm gonna hit up arrow a couple times to let you read the few things, and then I'll talk about them.
DOMContentLoaded colon 396 milliseconds. Finish colon 389 milliseconds. 10.4 KB resources. 104B transferred. 4 requests. Application space.
All right, awesome. So again, that's where you get, whenever you reload the page, the stuff that you were hearing read out loud by NVDA screen reader, it's that information. So the 4 requests, and then the size information, how much was transferred, how many resources, or what the size there is, and how long it took to take care of that. So right here, we just landed on an application element, and this is actually where our request log table is. So if I down arrow,
no indent 4 requests,
and then I up arrow,
application space,
you hear application space. So this is where our request log table is at. But before we actually look at this, there's a couple checkboxes I want to talk about, and that's above the search filter. So I'm going to hit E, and we're going to go look at those 2 checkboxes. So, and I meant Shift E. So Shift E.
Toolbar filter edit has autocomplete multi-line opens.
All right, from here, I'm going to press X twice, and then I'm going to let it land, and you will be listening to the first checkbox and then the explanation of that.
Toolbar preserve log checkbox not checked. Do not clear log on page reload / navigation.
All right, so you hear there. So preserve logs means that each request made on this page is going to be here in our logs. But if we were to move another page, those logs would not be preserved. So if we're testing a maybe a portal where you're selecting a product and then moving to a checkout page, or maybe even something as simple as what it looks like when a person moves from home page to about page or something like that, and you're trying to debug an issue or just trying to understand that network path, you can preserve those logs to be able to see what's going on from one place to the next. All right, let me move to the next checkbox with X.
Disable cache checkbox not checked. Disable cache while DevTools is open.
All right, so disable cache. So, and it says while DevTools is open. And so what this means is the browser will cache resources. So style sheets, scripts, images, it'll cache all that to give better performance on whenever everything loads up again. So if you are working heavily with CSS or JavaScript, you may not want to always have those resources cached. So you can disable cache to make sure you get a fresh pool each time if you're doing a lot of updates. So that's the 2 checkboxes I wanted to explain. All right, so now that we've looked at those checkboxes, we're going to move down and actually look at the request log. Now, the best way to get to this is with the tab key. The tab key, this page or tab within DevTools is very much set up for Shift Tab and tabbing. Now, you can move around with your arrows and things like that, but that application element that they use is not set up for that. So what we're going to do is we're going to press tab till we get to that request logs table.
Invert checkbox. Clickable show request types to include list fetch /xhr not doc not select CJS font IM media manifest socket not select wasm not select other not select overview right resizer slider network table name dash network overview grid window grouping.
So you're going to hear overview, and then after your overview, so I'm going to hit tab one more time. Right after overview is going to be your table.
Network log row name : localhost, status : 304 not modified.
Awesome. So I'm not going to let it finish reading there because I can tell you what it's going to say. So whenever you're in browse mode, like we are right now, the table, if you can only up arrow, down arrow, and so there's no left or right, you don't hear anything. But if I up arrow, down arrow, it's going to read cell by cell, and each cell is just a full row, and it's going to read that whole entire row. So that's not the best way to navigate and look at this table. The best way for me, because with the screen reader, alt control and the left right arrow or up down is the best way to navigate a table. So that's how we're going to do it. The way we're going to do that is I'm going to get out of browse mode. So NVDA modifier key plus spacebar. And then now we are inside of this application element, and all that we're actually like inside of the table. So it puts us immediately in column 1, and we can actually do control home.
Name.
And you hear name, and that's because name is the first column header. So now I can do alt control right arrow.
Row 1 column 2 clickable status.
And then you hear status.
Column 3 clickable type. Column 4 clickable initiator. Column 5 clickable size. Column 6 clickable time. Edge of table. Time.
All right, and I just right arrowed all the way across that table, so that's all of our table headers. Now I'm gonna go all the way back to the left, but again, I can just do control home.
Column 1 clickable.
And then from here, I can down arrow, and I can hear the name.
Row 2 clickable localhost.
All right, so we hear localhost. So this is the actual document that was loaded.
Row 3 clickable styles.css.
Then we have styles.css, which is our style sheet.
Row 4 clickable graphic image glasses.png.
All right, our image glasses, which is just a logo that I put on this page. It's from my Code and Blind Tech.
Row 5 clickable app.js.
And then app.js, so it's just a script file. All right, and then again, you can now right arrow to actually see
status column 2 clickable 200.
So we got a 200 status code. That means successful.
Row 4 clickable 200.
Another 200.
Row 3 clickable 200.
And now I'm just up arrowing because again, I'm just alt control and then up arrowing around this table. So right now I can alt control left arrow.
Name column 1 clickable styles.css.
So our styles.css.
Status column 2 clickable 200.
You hear the network or the status code there, so 200 is successful.
Type column 3 clickable style sheet.
All right, and then style sheet. So that gives us our type.
Initiator column 4 clickable link left paren, index right paren, :7.
Initiator and then index :7. So you can just hear there as I read to the right of this, we're getting that information. So, and this is very helpful information to understanding like what assets are being loaded or resources, what type they are, and then if they are failing, which you'll see in a minute, we'll look at that. You can see that information here. All right, so from here, what you can actually do
type status name edge of table.
Let's say that
row 4 clickable graphic image glasses. Row 5 clickable app.
Oh well, the best thing to show you is with the fetch request. Okay, so if we want to showcase that, what I'm going to do is I am going to get out of browse mode because we are already in browse mode. But the way that you get out of this is you actually have to shift tab.
Overview grid window grouping.
And then you hear we're back into overview, and now you can get out of or browse mode. And then now we can actually move around, right? So I can actually show you the filter. So the filter, and what I'll do is I'll show you the fetch request. That'll be last. So, and that'll be the two buttons that I click. But looking at the filter, we can Shift E.
Toolbar filter edit has auto.
And there's our filter. I'm gonna hit enter.
Toolbar.
We're gonna get in here, and let's say that we just want to see CSS files. So I'm just gonna type CSS.
Network data available. 1/4 requests 0.0 KB /0.1.
All right, so I cut it off there. Let me actually type that again and let you hear it out loud.
Network data available. 1/4 requests 0.0 KB /0.1 KB transferred 1.1 KB /10.4 KB resources finish : 389 milliseconds DOM content loaded : 396 milliseconds load : 396 milliseconds.
Awesome. So that's what you hear. So right there, I typed again CSS, and it pinged off on our style sheet, and those numbers right there. So one of 4 requests was had CSS associated with it, and then it talks about the time and how big that resource is. So, and again, if I were to hit escape out of this and then go to the bottom of the page with Control End.
Out of edit, out of toolbar, out of grouping, network data available.
All right, so right here I can up arrow, and we can just quickly up arrow to the first part where it says 1 of 4 requests.
Network DO finished 1.1 KB /0.01/4 requests.
All right, so right here, this is what you heard. This is what it was reading out loud. So whenever these values change, the dynamic functionality of the screen reader where it'll pick up dynamic changes will be, this will be announced. So 1 of 4 requests, and then it talks about the, again,
0.0 KB /0.1 KB transferred.
So there's how much was transferred.
1.1 KB /10.4 KB resources.
And that talks about the size.
Finish : 389 milliseconds.
And that's how quickly it finished.
DOM content loaded : 396.
And DOM content loaded. So this is just talking about the document object model, which represents the information that gets loaded into the page. So, all right. Now, the next thing is we can actually see that single request in our request logs table now. It will only contain that one request. So again, we don't have to tab through all the stuff in between the search filter and the application element where the table exists. And we don't have to shift tab from here either, right? We can actually just up arrow till we get to right above the application element.
Finish : 1.1 K 0.1 applications overview grid window. Out of grouping clickable application space.
All right, so here's our application element. I'm just going to up arrow one more time.
Overview grid window grouping clickable right resizer slider no indent 414 milliseconds.
All right, and you hear that overview and then right resizer. So this is kind of another landmark, like a secondary landmark. So you'll want to remember that as well, along with that filter. So I'm going to hit tab.
Network log row name : styles.css, comma.
Nice. All right, so it puts me right into the application now, or the application element. So now I'm looking at the logs table. In my mind, I'm wondering, am I in browse mode or am I just moving around freely? So to check that, I'm just going to go into browse mode or maybe out of browse mode. We'll see.
Network log row name.
All right, so it's actually in browse mode. So I'm going to go back out of it. And then now we know, oh, okay, well, I can hit Control Home.
Name.
And now I'm on that table header. I can do Alt Control down arrow.
Row 2 name, column 1 clickable styles.css.
Awesome. So now we hear styles.css. That's the name of it.
Status column 2 200.
All right. And then we hear the status. And, you know, again, we can just continue to do Alt Control right arrow to continue to hear information about that.
Name column 1.
All right, so now it's time to hit those buttons. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to shift tab out of this.
Time dash sortable column dot.
And then I'm going to get out of browse mode.
Space blank.
All right, so now what we want to do is we want to go up to that filter and we want to delete CSS. So I'm going to Shift E.
No previous edit field.
E.
No next edit.
Oh, I might not be where I think I am. So I'm going to Shift Tab again.
Size dash sortable column dot. Press enter to apply.
Oh, I see. So it's what it is because I was in the I wasn't at the top of the table. It's actually showing me that these column headers, you can actually sort these column headers whenever you have multiple things in the table. So what I'm going to do is get out of browse mode. And I assume that I'm inside of the application element, which is still the request logs table. So I'm going to press Control H or Control Home to get to the top.
Row 1, column 1, clickable, no indent name.
Awesome. So now we know we're at the top of that table. I'm going to Shift Tab.
Initiator dash sortable column dot.
And I'm going to Shift Tab again.
Network log row name colon. Styles.
And one more time.
Network log row name colon.
And I'm going to Shift Tab until I hear that secondary landmark.
Network log row, network log overview grid window grouping.
And there it is, overview grid. And then again, this is our secondary landmark. We know this is above the application element, which is where the request logs is. So where I'm gonna get out of browse mode now with the NVDA modifier key plus spacebar. Awesome. So now I should be able to Shift E and find that filter.
Toolbar filter edit has autocomplete.
Yes. Okay. Here it is. So now I'm gonna hit enter on this.
Toolbar.
I'm gonna Control A to select all.
CS.
And then I'm gonna hit backspace
S
to clear that. All right. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hit escape to get out of this. All right. So let's get into the buttons. So now we're gonna get into making a fetch or XHR request. All right, so what I'm going to do is we're going to Shift Tab.
Network tab demo bar coding blind tech.
Awesome. So, I'm sorry, Shift F6, and that will bring us back over to our main browser window. So now I can go to the top of the page with Control Home.
Graphic coding blind tech 3D glasses logo heading level 1 network
Awesome.
tab demo.
And so now what I can do is I can press B for button, and I want you to hear. We will hear some information from the actual web page itself, but you'll hear the information from the network panel as well. Now, I'm not going to let it fully read everything, but it does show you that it will dynamically update the screen reader to where it picks up that information. Now, it's not like that all the time, but this is just a good example of a time when it is. So if I press B for button.
Load team roster button.
All right, so load team roster. I'm going to hit enter on this.
Loading team roster dot. Network data available. 5 requests 104 B transferred 10.4 KB resources finish colon 53 milliseconds D.
All right, so I stopped it there. If there would have been more requests, like one after the other, it would have kept going. All right, so that loaded up. And what that does is just loads a team roster down below. So if I just down arrow.
Button request emit loaded 4 players with status 200.
So loaded 4 players with status 200.
Button request a missing loaded 4 players with status 200. Region heading level 2 team roster. List with 4 items bullet 8 comma, point guard.
All right.
Bullet grace comma, center.
And I'm just down airing. So you can see that there's an actual list here of loaded information coming from the server that's running. And then if I hit Shift B for button.
Request a missing file button.
We can now press enter on this request a missing file, and I'm going to let you listen to that in the network.
Requesting a file that does not exist. Network data available. Network data available. 6 requests 479 B transferred 10.6.
All right, and there now you hear 6 requests. So we're going to go explore that. Now we're going to look at something new, another way to filter. So I'm going to press F6 to get over to DevTools.
DevTools document. Network data available.
All right, so now in here, remember our secondary landmark. Well, let's get to that. So I'm going to do Control End to get to the bottom of the page.
Network data available.
All right, now I'm going to up arrow till I get to that secondary landmark, the overview grid.
Network DOM Finish code 11.0906 request application space overview grid window grouping.
All right, so from here, I'm just going to continue to up arrow until I hear where we can select the request type.
Left resizer slide 300 and 300, 200, 200, 100, 150, 0, 0 millisecond out of grouping request types to include list all.
All right, so it says request types to include list all. Now, another way to quickly get to this would be to use our primary landmark, which is the search filter. So I could do Shift E.
Toolbar filter.
All right, and then from here, just down arrow.
Out of edit, out clickable, no indent, invert. Menu button, sub menu. Request types to include list all.
And that would have actually been the faster way to do it. So the request types to include list all, so we can actually narrow our request log table down to only fetch / XHR request. So we're going to go into forms mode or browse mode here with NVDA modifier key plus spacebar.
Network panel prop.
All right, and now we're going to down arrow.
Fetch / XHR not selected. Fetch
and it's actually one of the first ones, so we're going to hit enter on this.
2/6 requests 0.9 KB /1.
Awesome, and now you hear there where our information down below updates, and now we're only looking at 2 requests in that table. Now what we can do is get out of browse mode, so NVDA modifier key plus spacebar. And now I'm going to go to the bottom of the page and then get up to our secondary landmark.
Out of group network DO finish 002/6 application space. Overview grid window group.
All right, there's our secondary landmark. Now I want to go into the application element where our request logs table is at. So I'm going to press tab.
Network log rows : 2, use.
All right, so we hear network log rows 2. So we need to make sure, are we in form or browse mode, or are we just looking around? So I'm going to hit Control Home, and that doesn't do anything. So I'm actually going to take and do NVDA modifier key plus spacebar.
Table clickable with 3 rows and 6.
Awesome. So that gets us out of browse mode. Now I'm going to go to the top.
Name.
With Control Home. And now I'm going to do Alt Control down arrow.
Name column 1 clickable graphic fetch players.json.
All right, here's where we fetch players.json. So I'm going to right arrow.
Status column 2 clickable 200.
200, awesome. I'm a right arrow.
Type column 3 clickable fetch.
And you hear fetch, so the type. And now I'm not going to continue to right arrow, but it's important to know that there's more information that we can see here. So but before I show you that, I want to talk about, a real world situation. If you're actually having an issue and you need to look at your network log, one of the things that you'll be looking for is the actual 404 page not found that we got. That may be something that you have to come across to understand. Oh, okay, now I see, and you can understand where it's being requested from to know if it's the right location. All right, so if I go all the way to the left, so I'm Alt Control left arrow.
Status name column 1 clickable graphic fetch player.
All right, and then I Alt Control down arrow.
Row 3 clickable graphic fetch request failed missing.json.
All right, so missing.json. So, well, what if we were trying to debug why? So, well, one reason that it could not be found is because of the location it's being requested from. What if this lived in an assets folder or some other folder and maybe the request location wasn't right? How would we figure that out? Well, first of all, we can actually right arrow.
Status column 2 clickable 404.
The status code's automatically going to tell us a 404. So next, what you can do.
Name column 1 clickable graphic fetch request failed missing.
All right, I'll control left arrow there, and let you hear it again.
Row 2 clickable, row 3 clickable graphic fetch request failed missing.json.
All right, you hear clickable.
Row 2 clickable graphic, row 3 clickable graphic.
So the name column is clickable for each row. And now what that does is it's going to open up more information down below the actual, 1/5 or 6 requests. So that information of how many requests are made and how long it took.
Edge of table.
All right, so to do that, all you have to do is press enter.
Network log rows : 2 comma. Use the open.
All right, and so what that does is again, it opens up a toolbar at the bottom. So we need to get out of this application element. So I'm going to control home.
Row 1 clickable name.
And that gets us to the top of it. And now we want to shift tab till we find that secondary landmark, the overview grid.
Overview grid window grouping.
All right, we found it there. I'm going to get out of browse mode, NVDA modifier key plus spacebar. And now we can down arrow past our information, our data.
Out of group no indent 0.0. Finish : DOM content load : SIG toolbar clickable button close.
All right, now you come to the toolbar, it's clickable, and there's a close button.
Out of toolbar tab selected headers.
And then if you down arrow, now we hear that we have some tabs here, and headers is selected. So if I down arrow through these,
tab preview.
We have a preview, which just takes the response and makes it look, it's a lot more readable. Down arrow again.
R. Tab response. Tab preview. Tab response.
All right, our response. So this is just the response that you get back from the server.
Tab initiator.
The initiator. So this is the code that made the request. What file and what line.
Menu button collapse submenu more tabs.
All right, and then we have some more tabs, but we can go into those in a future video.
General grouping button expanded general.
All right, and then we have general is expanded. Now this is our headers tab. This is where it starts. So if I press B for button.
Response headers grouping response headers left paren, 5 right paren, button collapse.
So we have response headers, left parenthesis, 5 right parenthesis. So that just means that we have 5 response headers and it's collapsed right now. If I press B for button again.
Request headers grouping request headers raw checkbox not checked clickable raw button expanded.
All right, so request headers. So this is expanded.
Button expanded checkbox not checked space. Button expanded clickable no indent raw.
And then we can actually get a raw view of this if we check this box, but we're not going to do that.
Except. */*. Except dash encoding. Zip comma. Deflate comma. B except dash language.
All right, and I'm just down arrowing through this to look at the information that's provided on the request header.
And dash us comma and semi-q equals 0.5 cache dash control. No dash cache. Connection. Keep dash alive. Host. Localhost : 8000. Pragma. No dash cache. Referrer. http://localhost : 8000/ seconds-ch quote not equals a question brand seconds-ch question 1 seconds-ca quote android quote seconds-fetch dash.
Right, and we continue to get a lot of information about this request. So what we are looking for though is what does the request header look like? So what file was requested?
Empty.
Whenever it made this? What was it looking for?
No previous heading.
All right, so to do that,
request headers raw checkbox not checked. Request headers left paren. Out of grouping out of group. Network grouping response headers grouping response headers left paren.
Out of the way.
Out of grouping general grouping strict dash origin dash referrer policy 127 remote address right. General button expand.
There we go. So now what we're going to do is if we want to know what file it tried to request or where did it try to request it from, immediately you can find it under general. So general information, I'm going to press down arrow.
Request URL.
So we have request URL.
http://localhost:8000/missing.json.
All right, so right there it tells you so 8000 and then / and then missing.json. So if that file, maybe we expected it to be in a directory where it was / files / missing, .json. And then we could debug that and understand that that's the problem there. Awesome. Okay, so now the last thing I want to show you about these fetch XHR requests is the successful one, right? So we have some response information that got returned on that request. So what I'm going to do is go back up to our secondary landmark and get back in that request logs table.
General button expanded.
All right, so I'm doing Shift B, and that gets me to General.
More tabs menu button collapse sub.
Shift B as in button again gets me to the More tabs, so I'm going to up arrow from here.
Tab init tabbers tab pre tab sil toolbar out of tool DO finish 0.02 slash application space.
And there's our application, so I'm going to up arrow one more time.
Overview grid window grouping right reset.
Awesome, so here's our secondary landmark, our overview grid. I'm going to press tab.
Network log row name.
All right, so it did not make the sound of being in browse mode, so I'm going to press Control Home.
Name.
Awesome, so it is not in browse mode. So now we can do Alt Control down arrow.
Row 2 clickable graphic fetch players.json.
All right, and here's our fetch players.json. This is the one where we got our 200 response. So we're going to press enter on this.
Network log row name : missing.
Awesome. So now again, we need to get out of this and down to where the request header information is. Now, you can press tab to get there. So I'm going to press tab. The other way was we press Control Home and then Shift Tab on our secondary landmark, and then we do NVDA modifier, keep a spacebar, and then we just down arrow to that information. But right now I'm going to press tab.
Table name dash sort of toolbar close button.
All right, so now it's in the toolbar, but we're in forms mode or browse mode. So I'm going to get out of that. All right, so now I'm going to down arrow.
Out of toolbar tab selected headers.
All right, our headers are selected. So what I'm going to do is
tab response.
So the response tab, I'm going to press enter on this.
Selected.
All right, now our response tab is selected. I'm just going to down arrow.
Tab initiator, menu button collapse submenu more tabs, code editor edit multi-line left bracket.
All right, so this is a raw version of the response. So the first thing you heard there was the left bracket, and then it's just going to be JSON. This is just what was returned from the server. So I'm going to down arrow.
2 space left brace quote name quote colon, quote eta quote comma, quote roll quote colon, quote point guard quote right brace comma.
All right, so you hear the information there. Remember, that's the first one in the list in the browser.
Left brace quote name quote colon, quote grace quote comma, quote roll quote colon, quote center quote right brace comma. Left brace quote name quote colon, quote Allen quote comma, quote roll quote colon, quote shooting guard quote left brace quote name quote colon, quote Catherine quote comma, quote roll quote colon, no indent right bracket.
Awesome.
Blank.
So this is just, so if you're going through and you're developing an API and you're trying to understand what the response looks like you don't have to console log it out on the server side. You know, some people will. There's all kind of ways of doing different things, and this is just one way where you can actually log it out raw and it'll come through the network and you can see that response right here. So
out of edit tool.
Awesome. All right, so that wraps up the fetch slash XHR portion. So now that pretty much wraps up everything that I wanted to show you with the network tab. There are some pretty important keystrokes and things we have learned, multiple ways of doing things. So one last run through, what I'm going to do is do a full speed just run through and show you a couple things that we've learned. But I'm not going to be announcing all keystrokes like I have been throughout the video. This is just a quick rundown of what have explored. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to close the network tab.
Network data available.
And the way I did that was with F12. You can use Control-Shift-I if you would like to.
Button load team roster.
Awesome, so this puts me back in the actual browser.
Graphic coding blind tech.
I'm going to reload this.
Network tab demo bar coding blind tech.
Awesome.
Mainland.
So we don't hear anything there, but now we're going to open up our DOMContentLoaded. So
DevTool network.
Control-Shift-I, and that's automatically, remember, going to drop us into the filter. So now what I'm going to do is hit escape and go down and reload.
Out of edit, out of toolbar, out of network grouping, clickable button, reload page.
And there's our reload button at the bottom. I'm going to hit enter.
DevTools document. Network data available. Button reload page. 0.
Awesome. All right, so our requests are in, and then I stopped it there. So now I'm just going to go to the bottom. I want to see how many requests came in.
Out of group network DO finish colon.
I'm just going to the bottom, my up arrow.
0.00.00/4 application space.
All right, 0/4 requests. So what this means is that we did get 4 requests, but you know, we did forget to change our request type filter back to all, and so it does save that information if the browser stays open. So I am going to go to our primary landmark.
Toolbar filter edit has auto.
All right, so Shift E gets me to that. I'm a
out of edit, out of clickable, no indent in menu button, sub menu, show all request types to include list fetch slash
is request types, and I stopped it, but it is on fetch /XHR. So I am going to go into browse mode.
Network.
I'm gonna up arrow.
All not selected one.
That gets me to all. It says not selected. I'm just gonna press enter.
4 requests 100.
Awesome. So now we get our 4 requests, and I'm gonna just get out of browse mode. Go to the bottom.
Out of grouping.
Up arrow.
Network DO. Finish 10.4 KB. 104 B. 4 requests.
There we go. 4 requests. Awesome. So now I want to see each of those requests.
Application space.
There's our application element.
Overview grid window grouping right.
Awesome. Here's our secondary landmark. I'm going to press tab.
Network log rows colon.
I didn't hear it go into browse mode, so I'm going to get to the top.
Name colon. Localhost comma.
Awesome. So it actually is in browse mode. I'm going to get out of browse mode.
Table clickable. Name.
All right. Now we hear our name. So I'm just going to go through this table. Alt Control down arrow.
Name column 1 clickable. Row 1. Row 2 clickable localhost.
So
row 1, row 2 clickable
document.
Row 3 clickable styles.css. Row 4 clickable graphic image glasses.png. Row 5 clickable app.js. Edge of table. App.
Awesome. So there's our 4 requests. I'm just going to leave it here in the table, and I'm going to Shift F6.
Network tab demo barcoding block.
That puts me back on the page. I'm going to go ahead and load this roster and then request this file that don't exist.
Main landmark load team roster. Loading team roster dot. Network data available. 5 requests 100.
Awesome. And then we get that feedback, 5 requests. That's just because our network tab's still open.
Request a missing file button.
Let's go ahead and request this missing file.
Requesting a file that does not exist dot. Network data available. 6 requests 479 B transferred 10.6.
Awesome. So we hear 6 requests again. So now let's go look at those 2 requests.
Network log row name.
So I press F6 to get back over here. Is it still in our table? Let's see. Control home.
Row 1 clickable name.
It is. So, but we're showing all 6 here. So I only want to show the XHR request, the 2 that we just did. So I'm actually going to use not the request filter type. We're actually just going to use the actual primary landmark, which is that search filter. So right here, I'm gonna
name.
I'm at the top. I'm gonna Shift tab.
Overview grid window.
Awesome. There's our overview grid window. I'm gonna get out of the browse mode and find that primary landmark with Shift E.
Toolbar filter edit has.
There it is. I'm gonna press enter.
Toolbar.
And now in here, I could just type fetch. So FETCH.
Network data 0/6 request 0.0 KB slash 1.0.
This is us just kind of getting an idea of how this filter is going to work. That actually didn't work. So let's backspace.
HCTEF.
So we'll get out of, we will remove that fetch, and we're going to do XHR.
Net 0/6 request 0.0 KB slash 1.0.
Okay, so it doesn't actually search for the type in the filter. It's probably more based around the name. So I'm sure like load.
Net 0/6 request DA. Network data available. 1/6 request 0.
Oh yeah, so LA is going to pick that up.
Network data.
Oh, sorry.
Net
and then, so this is actually a perfect example where it's like, oh, well, maybe the search filter isn't the best option. So what is our second option, right? The filter type, or the request type. We can use that filter where we select the radio button. So we can actually make sure there's nothing in this filter. So I'm doing that, just backspacing, clearing it out. I'm going to press tab.
Invert checkbox. Show only / request types to include list.
Right, and that gets the third or fourth tab gets me to the actual request type. So now I'm a down arrow.
Fetch /XHR not selected. Fetch and
awesome. So here's our fetch XHR. I'm gonna hit enter on this.
Network data available. 2/6.
Now we get those 2 we want, and we can just quickly tab down to that request log table.
Doc not CJ I media man socket not was other overview.
And this might not be the best way. So if you don't want to do it this way, again, another way is to get out of browse mode And then now we can just down arrow.
Right out of group. No indent 0.2 application space. No indent to application.
There's our applicant. Let me up arrow to our secondary landmark.
Overview grid window grouping right resize.
Awesome. So now we can press tab from here.
Network log rows colon.
And then control home.
Name.
All right. And that puts us at the top of our table. And now I'm going to do alt control down arrow.
Row 2 clickable graphic fetch players.json.
Yep. There's our fetch players.
Row 3 clickable graphic fetch request failed missing.json.
So fetch request. And then it's very possible because I didn't do a capital F that didn't work.
Graphic cap F.
Yep.
E.
Yep. FE was what was on that. So just to, out of curiosity, let's go see. So if I get to the top of this,
row 1
control home, and then get out of this with shift tab.
Overview grid window.
Get out of browse mode. Shift E.
Toolbar filter edit.
Hit enter.
Toolbar.
And then I'm going to type capital F.
0/6 network data available. 0/6 request 0.0 KB/1.0 FETT.
Still doesn't find it, but to be honest with you, that's the main reason I'm doing this video, is because this can be a very tricky place. So it does not find it, but I'm sure if we did some research, we could understand why. But we are going to get back down to our table.
Clickable menu request over 20,00 milliseconds. Out of grouping request type menu button sub menu show only /hide request.
Alright.
Request types to include overview grid window grouping 0 millisecond.
Our secondary landmark. I'm going to hit tab.
Overview grid window group right resizer slider 1 network log rows colon.
And then now we're in our network table.
Name.
I'm going to go back to the top of this and then alt control down arrow.
Row 2 clickable graphic fetch players.json.
Nice.
Row 3 clickable graphic fetch request failed missing.json.
And there's our failed. Let's just look at our status code with alt control right
status
arrow.
column 2404.
404. And then again, this table gives us more information.
Type column 3 fetch. Initiator column 4 link app.js colon 34.
So app.js colon, that just means that it's from app.js file, and then line number 34 is what comes after that colon.
Size column 5 0.5 KB.
And the size of the file, that's just how big it is.
Time column 5 milliseconds.
Right here, the time is just how long did it take for this actual file to load.
Size column edge of table.
All right, so doing alt control left arrow until I get to the edge of the table. Now, again, remember these items are clickable, and also the CSS, JavaScript, the image, those are all clickable and all have header information, previews, payload, which is what you sent, so, and more information like that. So let's go look at the actual fetch where we got the 200 success.
Row 2 clickable graphic fetch players.json.
Awesome. We can press
network log
enter on this and then go to the top of this table.
Row 1 clickable.
Shift tab.
Overview grid window.
There's our secondary landmark. Get out of browse mode. All right, now we want to down arrow.
Out of group. No indent 0.0. Finish DOM load colon. 3 toolbar clickable button
There's
close.
Our toolbar with our close button. Okay, now we can press B for button, because remember,
out of toolbar tab headers.
Oh, well, it depends on if you were already in here or not. So remember, we had response selected last.
Tab preview.
And then, so make sure that you want to make sure you typically headers by default, but that's only if you haven't opened it within a session. So we already have header or response.
Tab selected response.
Right here, tab selected response. So I'm going to down arrow so we can see that response.
Tab init menu code editor 2 space left brace quote name quote colon quote grace quote comma quote roll quote colon.
Awesome. And again, this is just where we can inspect and see what it looks like, because then we can handle it on the actual client side. Cool deal. All right, so this concludes the video. I hope you enjoyed this video. Remember, the next video for this series will be elements, and then we'll move into sources. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below, and I will be sure to get back to them. All right, well, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.